Good day, everybody. Brian here from quantlabs.net. Today I'm going to talk about Redis 4, the roadmap, and why I use Redis. First, let's talk about the traditional databases out there, SQL Server, Oracle, even MySQL. These databases are fairly bloated. They really hinder your performance when it comes to data analysis. You need a good data store. I've looked at pretty well all of them historically, and there's that NoSQL versus traditional RDBMS debate versus NoSQL. If you ask me, NoSQL is definitely the future. And when you start looking at the different data stores within NoSQL, it comes back to, well, which ones are good and which ones are not. A lot of them are either built off of a true open source model or a freemium model. A good example is Mongo. So for instance, if you want to use Mongo open source, fine. It is open source, but I say freemium because let's say if you want to move into things like using in-memory, you got to pay for it. It's about $10K to get started with that. So that's just another example of why these type of databases will hinder your performance as you build out your trading system, as well as your need for holding or using data and using a data store for research purposes or testing purposes. So along comes Redis. I've been a big believer in it. If you come under my YouTube channel, come under playlists, I've got a whack load of videos on Redis. So just do a search on Redis here. So you'll see I've got over 46 videos over the last number of years on why I use Redis. By the end of the day, we've got Redis 4 coming up, and the big thing I love about Redis is two big reasons I like it. Is first, it's true open source. It's like all the extra functionality you want out of Redis, you're not paying for, and you can build out locally on your own systems or own hardware, and that's nice. And you can also do the failover redundancy, clustering, and all that as well, and you're not paying extra for that. I mean, there is a web service, kind of like a cloud solution called Redis Labs, which I've talked about in the past as well, which are quite good. I just find them a little expensive for Redis, and all the power to them if that's what they can charge and that's what it costs to hold data in a cloud environment. Anyways, so come back to our Redis roadmap. But the thing is, what are the big features of Redis 4, that is? And Redis 4 is still in beta. So when you come into the Redis site and you want to download, what you'll do is you'll have the stable, typical open source model, stable versus beta. So beta is the 4. I'm not sure when this will officially get released, but today is April 15th, 2017. We don't know where that will be. So when you look at the new features in Redis, let's go over them. Here's the new major features. The first one's this new modules. We'll talk about that in more detail. This is really exciting. So you can build out, I guess, equivalent of modules or plugins on top of the core database itself. This I also like. Partial replication makes it even smarter in the engineering of this software, is that it's backward compatible as well. Not a lot of software can say that. So you can still have your slaves a master and have the Redis 4 as a master, and still have your Redis 3, or I'm not sure prior, but it sounds like Redis 3 slaves, and you'll still be able to talk to it. That's basically what I'm getting from this. Also, we have these eviction improvements. So if you have clusters that are not being used, you can evict them from your cluster to save on memory. Lazy freeing keys. So again, if you have keys within your cluster that you're not using a lot, you can automatically in the background basically, I guess, unlink them from the cluster, and again in a non-blocking way. That's pretty smart. So it's not going to have any impact, I guess, on the cluster or the performance of the cluster. Very nice indeed. Now all this other stuff is probably getting a little more low level. Here, of course, memory command for figuring out where there might be some memory issues within your cluster. So as a result, I'm sure there's a client for this you can get somewhere along the line, GUI based. So that would be very useful. Of course, if you want to run Redis in a cluster, or sorry, in Docker, you can definitely do that. Here's the key. This is how smart the engineering is. It uses less memory in order to store the same amount of data. Depends on the data set used. And you can also have defragmenting as well to reclaim the space while running. That is pretty impressive. And then we get into the smaller functionality as well. I'll let you go through that as well on your own time. So now, when you do a search for Redis modules, that will bring you to redismodules.com, to here, which is essentially home of Redis, which is Redis Labs, as I mentioned. So we have all these new modules coming aboard, and there's a few things I want to talk about here. A good, nice one here is the graph. I haven't really played with this, so what I want you to understand is, if you are in the world of trading, if you are in the world of automated or high-speed trading, a good example is obviously the best in the business, probably Goldman Sachs. They have their own proprietary database called SecDB. Slang, their proprietary language is built off it. It's been around for probably decades. Very old technology, but it essentially, and I've done my research on this, is that database is a graph database. Now, I'm not going to get into explaining what a graph database is, but when you work at Goldman Sachs in risk or in trading, for every trade that's submitted into their execution engine globally throughout the enterprise of Goldman Sachs, has to run through this SecDB. So what that database will have is a large set of rules to ensure that the risk is properly aligned and that there's really no malfeasance in the trading, so on and so forth. So that's to protect Goldman Sachs, the enterprise, the portfolio, the entire set of portfolios that Goldman Sachs manages, and keeps everything in line and in check. And that is only capable through a graph database. So the graph database is fairly complicated to develop, but here we are, we see a module for it. So we'll look at that in a minute. Now, the other exciting one I really like is this other one called Redis ML for machine learning. So we'll look at that in a minute. So the other one is this one, this Redis rank-based statistics estimator. And I could go on through the other ones as well, but I think these modules alone that will sit on top of the core Redis versions that I've worked with are quite powerful. So let's take a look at this graph. So it's using Neo4j Cipher query language. Project is a mod that implements graph database nodes. Is the graph represents entities such as persons or places, and connection such as a visit or made between the entities. So this is kind of like some kind of entity that you can apply in the world of trading, be it past trades, be it risk entities, a variety of things that you can again build rules around. You can have multiple attributes for each entity, optimal for storing them, and a node in the graph as a hash in the entity's key. So, for example, you have an entity called Barack Obama. Redis would be Barack Obama, 2 of its field, age and profession. We could also have another entity under the key Hawaii with an attribute population. So you can see where this goes, where it's fairly limited based upon how you define your entities, and then you can also search within Redis built around those entities. Just as an example. Now again, that's all high level. Now the machine learning one's very interesting. So you can set up Redis as a model server. So let's go into detail here. Module that implements several machine learning models as Redis data types. That statement right there is beyond powerful. Stored models are fully operational, support performing predictions and evaluations. Now, I'm no expert in the world of machine learning. What that basically tells me is that based on my data and how I define the data, that's defined through my clients, when it binds into Redis, I can easily probably set these models. Redis is a turnkey solution for trained models in a production environment. Wow. So these can include decision trees, linear regression, logistic regression, or matrix operations. Now, this one is pretty well screaming to me saying the equivalent of a genetic algorithm. So I can have multiple maybe models running in parallel, have them set up as either rules or indicators or separate parameters, and as data comes in, as I analyze, I can set up those rules. So that's one way. Now, logistic regression, I'm really no expert here, but the linear regression is quite interesting when you want to analyze returns or pricing performance of some kind. You can obviously regress based upon that. Decision trees I've never really gotten into, but I hear that all the time in machine learning. So I'm assuming that you can definitely build around that or on top of it. This one, the Redis T digest module data structure, which can be used for accurate online accumulation for rank-based statistics, such as quantiles and cumulative distribution at a point. Implementation is based on merging digest implementation by the author. This is kind of interesting because does that mean I can build out rankings based upon, again, statistical normal distributions or whatever other type of distribution I choose? I don't know, but again, I'm assuming you can definitely do it. So, in a nutshell, this is pretty powerful stuff. Now, the other question is when it comes to the module clients, because if you're new to the world of Redis, we have clients here. And these are all the languages that you can use to connect into the Redis server. And then, of course, run all these pieces of Redis. As you can see, probably if you watch my Redis set of videos, I will explain that. But these are all the languages. And there's very few databases, if any, a lot of them, that can connect into Redis using this type of data server. So here we have C, C++, as well as Java and Python, and soon to be Swift for my use. So obviously C, I know, and the languages in C, I mean, Redis is built on C. So if you're ever wanting to see the source code, it's very simple. GitHub, Redis, source code. And then here in GitHub, boom, you're now entering the world of Redis source code server. So you could customize this if you want. Again, no other data vendor or database vendor that I know of provides that. Maybe MySQL, but you really want to work with something that's really going to bog you down. So I find this very interesting with what in the direction that Redis is going in. The two that I'm very interested in is, let's see the, this one here. No, we want Redis Graph. I think it's going to be powerful. So the question then goes, okay, what languages am I using to connect into or using these modules to be able to take advantage of this? So I'm going to go under test. So it looks like I have to keep everything in C to really take advantage of the data nodes. So I'm going to be using C for that, and of course the modules are, I'm going to assume, written in C as well. That's fine. Okay, so if I go into the database, machine learning, I'm sure it's the same thing. So here, we're running right on top of the console in Redis using these commands. So let's check out so we can definitely build on top of the modules, but it looks like we're really limited to C, the language. But then again, using Python or somewhat C++, and it's somewhat compatible, we would have to build out some custom libraries. But definitely, we should be able to bind into these modules, these Redis lab modules, or whatever Redis modules, using C. As you can see here, C, C, C. You see? Funny, eh? So, very exciting, and definitely could use Python to extend it into the world of Python. So I'm pretty excited to see this, to see how it evolves. And I'm very happy to be sticking with Redis, because it's just very exciting to see both a graph database or a graph module coming out of this, and as well as some kind of machine learning capability. Let me just go back to that machine learning. Let's see what else it says, if there's any updates. So we got linear regression, logistics regression. So I'm sure it's going to get pretty cool, however it plays out. But just wanted to introduce to you the options out there and what I would probably recommend if you plan to go the same route. Use Redis, it's free, and it looks pretty exciting moving ahead as using Redis as your data store for your automated trading systems. Later.